Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Joining us now is the Conservative MP Jacob Rees Mogg, who described David Cameron's reform deal as thin gruel, and Nicholas Smith, Head of Economic and Social Affairs at the Trades Union Congress. They say leaving the EU would be bad for the rights of British workers. It finds the TUC in a most remarkable condition, which is supporting a Conservative Prime Minister desperately, hoping that he'll get a deal.
Well, do you know what? We've never been great fans of this deal, but what we're glad is that it looks as if union campaigning has stopped workers' rights getting worse as a result of it. And what we think now needs to become clear to people at work across the UK are the very significant benefits that employment protection from the EU is continuing to bring them. 6 million workers got more paid holidays when the Working Time Directive came in the UK. 1 in 4 women have seen extra time off and opportunities to taking time off when their kids are unwell.
You were afraid this would be eroded?
Well, we were very concerned early on in the negotiations that it looked as if these sorts of important protections were going to be negotiated. We've campaigned hard for them to be kept in, and we're glad that European leaders haven't agreed. But the reality is, with this government, which has actually eroded employment protections for people already in the UK in charge, would you want them in charge of your employment rights? We don't think that's a great gamble for people at work.
Well, Jacob Rees Mogg, you claim to have changed your position, but you have all the visage of anti-EU from the outset.
Well, I don't like our current relationship with the European Union, but the Prime Minister initially said he was going to try and get a fundamental change in our relationship. And I strongly supported that because whatever happens, whether we're in or we're out, we have to have a serious relationship with our closest neighbours and major trading partners. Whether that's under the auspices of the EU or is outside is a different matter.
Well, it's hard to imagine anything likely to upset a relationship with our closest trading neighbours than telling them to go away and we'll have our own life, thank you.
Well, we had our own life perfectly well before we joined.
Jolly long time ago.
1973 is not that long ago. You were telling me earlier you voted in the referendum and you're not that close to retirement. So even young men remember when we
Flattery
joined.
will get you everywhere,
But the point is that there are other international bodies that we can deal with. We can have our relationship with the European Union through the World Trade Organization in terms of trade. There are a whole host of other bodies that we can cooperate with them through. But it is obviously sensible and in the British interest to have diplomatic relations with many countries, not just European ones.
He makes it sound very easy, casual business.
Well, if I was someone, well, I will be voting in the referendum, and I was thinking about what's best for my future and my children's future, I would think very hard about the impacts on employment, for example, of leaving the European Union. 3 to 4 million jobs depend on our trade with the EU. 40% of our exports go to the EU. Lots of our investment depends on that. If we think we'd get the same prices, the same opportunities if we're trading with that market, if we just removed ourselves from the club, I think perhaps we're kidding ourselves. And I've already mentioned the employment rights protections people get. If you're an agency worker in the UK, your right to equal treatment with a full-time worker comes from the European Union.
Well, those are the fundamentals, and the idea that this shadow negotiation is really going to make any difference, it hasn't really changed the equation.
Oh, the negotiations are completely irrelevant. I mean, thin gruel was probably exaggerating the Prime Minister's success.
No gruel
at this
at all.
stage. No gruel at all, no. It's tinkering at the edges. We can't even decide who we pay benefits to, and we're going to have to pay benefits to lots of children not living in this country. So there's nothing in the renegotiation. There ought to have been something, and that is disappointing. But
when you have something as fundamental as in and out, okay, the idea that somebody's going to be swayed because they managed to get some deal on migrant benefits seems improbable.
I think that's true. I think the whole approach to the renegotiation was unambitious, and today's poll in The Sun has shown that actually we've got a very strong position in Europe. We're quite popular in Europe, and more could have been asked for.
Well, I can flatter you by saying it's a remarkable thing to find you reading The Sun.
It's a great newspaper and understands very often how the British people think.
That'll be a headline tomorrow.
But I just want to add on the economic arguments. A lot of the arguments being used are the same ones that we used about investment and trade if we didn't join the euro. We didn't join the euro, and that has been enormously advantageous for our economy because we've been freer. And on employment rights, Actually, I trust British voters to elect governments to make their employment laws for them. I don't think those laws need to be made for us by foreigners. A Labour government may wish to campaign for more employment rights, a Conservative government may wish to reduce them, but surely that's the right of voters, not the European courts.
I think the reality is that in recent years, the big employment rights gains under Labour and the Conservatives that people have seen have come from Europe. Paid holiday, paid rest breaks, rights for time off if you've got kids and your kids are unwell, protection from discrimination
All of those
if you're
you would
pregnant.
support?
All of those come
Would
from
you
the EU,
support?
and I'm waiting for a government.
I don't support all the
I'm
employment
waiting for
rights
government
that come
ministers
from
to
Europe.
go. I'm waiting for a government.
I don't support all the
I'm
employment
waiting for
rights
government
that come from
ministers to
Europe.
go. I'm waiting for a government.
I don't support all the
I'm
employment
waiting for
rights
government
that come from
ministers
Europe.
to go.
Can't remember such a bitter time. Well, the bosses jump, the workers fall in line. I'm not down, but I'm feeling low. The whippers seem to line with the threat of it all. Time and time when the workers rising, with the fight backs down, and the papers rise up. Lead us into blind retreat. One by one, take the money. 10 by 10, we make
On record and start defending them and start making the case to the people at work about why they think that actually an EU that works better for people at work would be one that
those
gives
are now-
more of those protections, not fewer.
What
I
Nicola
don't
has just spelt out are the fundamentals by which people now live.
I don't support all the rights that have come from the EU, but most fundamentally...
So you'd erode them. As soon as we were out, you'd
There are
scrap
some
all those
hold on,
rights
hold on.
which,
There are
which
some-
she spelt out.
there are
It is better to die on our feet than to live on our knees. If we fight as one, then the fight is won, yeah. Till that day we'll keep giving on, yeah.
some elements that I would change, and I think certainly the changes to agency
I think
employment
this is
were
a
very
big
unhelpful.
question for people. I mean,
But-
you've got a Conservative government at the moment that's introduced reductions in people's protection from unfair dismissal, fees for employment
But this
tribunals.
is-
Do people trust that under this government those important protections
This
would
is
be safe if we
democracy.
voted to leave?
This is democracy, that if people don't like what the government does, they can elect Jeremy Corbyn to do something different. The problem with Europe is whether you elect Jeremy Corbyn or you elect David Cameron, we can't change our employment rights. They're set by somebody else. So the vote you cast in the ballot box in the next election is devalued.
Under governments across the last decades, Labour and Conservative, these have been employment gains that have been initiated in Europe and transposed into UK law. What we're seeing is they've brought real benefits for people and for their families. And if we were to leave, who knows what would happen? Would those rights all be suspended? Would they be reintroduced by one government or another with less
Well, that's
protection?
democracy.
Would we see things get worse? You know, actually, I think people have got a lot at stake here in terms of how they may find their own rights, their paid time off, their holiday, and also their jobs and those opportunities for their kids. in the
Just a
future.
last one for you. You've shown you're in touch by reading The Sun, but are you hearing how many Tory MPs are now going to go no?
I don't know. That there have been
People are
various...
saying a fifth.
There have been various forecasts. The Spectator has one forecast, Guido Fawkes
When
has
you're in those
another.
T-bars, people come up to you and say, Jacob,
Well,
we're with you.
I went to speak at a Conservative event, and the MP who was there, Jack Lepresti, said I could begin my speech by announcing he was on the Leave side. So the numbers are growing steadily. It's a growing army of people who want freedom and democracy, and to be in a country called the United Kingdom, not a country
Jacob
called
Rees
Europe.
Mogg, Nicola Smith, thank you both very warmly.
K-E-E-P